Well, I mean, in terms of EQ, you can do certain things. I mean, it really depends on what instruments you're using and what kinds of combinations you're trying to achieve. But you know, it's like as Paul told me when I started doing this, he's like, just trust your ears. You know, you've listened to hours and hours and hours of orchestral recordings. Just try to, you know, keep that in mind when you're combining different things.
So there were a few spots there where the meter suddenly switched. Was that due to the picture, or is that something you just like doing to make things interesting?
This is a fantastic question, and it makes me feel very nostalgic because I got to ask Jerry Goldsmith that exact same question once. It was at UCLA. He was teaching a small group of students there, and they had like a public showcase thing where each student presented their work, and Goldsmith was there to critique it. Wouldn't all of us love to get that sort of chance? So, and I was in the audience, and at the end of it there was a Q&A, and I learned that the budget for Star Trek Insurrection was $1 million, music budget. But anyway, so I got to ask him this question. I was very nervous. I'm like, you know, I hear a lot of mixed meters in your music, and it's so cool, and I love it. And did this develop because of picture changes? You know, you have a 4/4 bar, and you get new picture. You need to take out 1/8, and it becomes a 7/8. Or how did that evolve? And he said, great question. And he explained that it was always part of his composing style, that even before he seriously got into film music, that's the kind of rhythmic thing that he loved experimenting with. And so I learned from that, and I'm fascinated by mixed meters, and a composer friend of mine joked that I'm incapable of writing a piece that's entirely in 4/4. And you know, which sounds funny, but I actually got a commission like 3 years ago to write a piece for choir in sort of a Bach chorale kind of style, and it needed to be all in 4/4, and I put in 1/5/4 there, and they told me, oh, this is, nah, can't have that. So I'm like, yeah. So I'm capable of writing a piece in 4/4, but it takes a lot out of me.
It's hard. There's something to be said for that, because the ear, you know, let's take the complete opposite end of the spectrum, where a composer writes in 4/4 and phrases tend to be in 4 or 8 measures. When you compose in that style, which is less adventurous, the listener's ear gets used to it, and you know, even subconsciously they start figuring out the patterns. Oh, there's a section 4, here's a section 4, here's a section of 8, and the music feels more predictable, and it can kind of float to the bottom of your conscious. Whereas if you're smart about using timing changes, you can keep the listener on their toes. They never quite know what's going to happen next.
Exactly, and that's the fascinating thing about Jerry Goldsmith's action scoring. You know, that's I think why he was so brilliant, is because you listen to his action music, and he himself said there's only so many ways you can score a car chase or an action scene, and he managed to keep it interesting for his entire career. It depends on several things. You know, sometimes I watch it and I'm like, you know, even though the director loves the temp, I don't know if it's the right approach. So, you know, the best thing you can do as a composer is to deliver at least 2 different versions, like up front. You know, to say, hey, this is what your temp is doing, and I do something similar, and this is what I feel might also work. You know, why don't you give it a try? In terms of key, you know, I usually look at what the music that comes before, you know, and so the transition makes sense. So sometimes it's in the same key, but I would say in most cases when I try to replicate the temp, it's not in the same key. You know, I do my best, because, I mean, as a listener, I think it frustrates all of us if we can hear the temp through the score. So I work hard to avoid that, and I'm sure all of us do.
I love that question because it's a real pitfall. We've all kind of heard music that has, oh yeah, that's my symphoby thing, or that's my whatever it is thing.
Yeah.
And it's a pitfall because it can be so easy to, you know, I know I need something Eilidh for the scene, and I pull up my Eilidh libraries, and great, that's it, and stick it in, and you think your work is done, and then as a composer, is it really done, or did you just, you know, needle drop a sample? You know, somebody orchestrated that sample for that library.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said for, as a composer, taking your time and not trying to rush those things too much, but figuring out yes, you can take shortcuts. You can use samples of aleatoric techniques, but finding a way to incorporate them and make them your own, so it's not just somebody else's orchestration, but it becomes yours or part of yours, like you were saying.
Yes, and sometimes also using filters, and there's software that will take a pre-existing sound and make something completely different out of it. It can be tricky because then it might become too synthy sounding, and you still want to have this. You want to maintain the quality of the orchestral nature of the sample, but there's ways that you can alter some qualities of the samples that you're